All right, in this quick video tutorial, we're going to just look at a couple of little techniques for cutting things out of the background in Photoshop. We're going to be looking at selecting things based on color, based on geometric shapes, and then using some quick select to select things like hair and a few of the more complex selections. So jump on in, I hope you learn a tip or two, and let's get started. Whenever you're selecting things inside of Photoshop, you need to sort of break down what type of selection it's going to be. And different tools will work a little bit different depending on the type of selection. So for this particular example here, we're going to be cutting out this building from the background. And it's a very geometric based shape. So you're going to use a geometry based tool to extract this particular object from the background. Now your geometry based tools in Photoshop are up here in the sidebar here in your tools. There are the poly lasso tool here, the polygonal lasso tool, and the magnetic lasso tool. Any of the marquee tools, so you have your rectangular, elliptical, and these single rows. Those are your main tools for working with things that are shape-based selections. In this second example here, this one is going to be a selection. We're going to be using the quick select tool. And specifically, in conjunction with the quick select tool, we're going to be using the refine select and mask command and the refine edge tool to really kind of pull out the hair here from the background. So of course, we're going to be extracting here our subject from the background, so we'll cut him out. In this particular photo, we're going to be cutting out this sort of seascape here. So this example is going to be using a color-based selection method. So you can see we sort of have a lot of blues back here. So instead of just selecting, or rather trying to select all these buildings, we're instead going to select the blue hues using color-based selections. Now, whenever you're working with color-based selections, you want to use the magic wand as your main tool, or the command that is the color range command. So you can come up in here and go to select, down to color range, and those are the two primary tools for working with extracting objects based on their color. And then lastly here, when you have an object like this, where I want to extract the car from the background, yes, it's a shape, but it's very organic. So there's a lot of curves to this shape. There's not a lot of hard edges. So most of these tools earlier we looked at are not going to work very well. So for this particular example, we're not going to be using color. We're not going to be using quick select. We're instead going to opt for manual selection with the pen tool, which has sort of those built-in nice Bezier handles to be able to get just around the curvature of the car. So these are the four primary photos that we're going to be looking at for extracting and looking at how to cut things out from the background. And we'll go ahead and get started here with the first image. Now this image here you can see is brought to us by Chan Soon from Beijing, China. So let's just go ahead and turn that layer off and we'll be working primarily here on the background. So I'm going to double click it and hit OK just to turn that background layer here into a regular layer. And let's go ahead and get started. Now with this image, I could try to do a magic wand. You can see I can try to select things by their color, but it's not going to give us very clean results. You can see it gives us a pretty jagged edge along some areas, and down here it's cut in too much. So it's just not quite what we need. And the problem, I've chosen this image on purpose because it presents a little bit of a challenge, meaning that the sky is white, the building is white, everything is sort of white. So it's really hard to use these automatic color-based tools to select out this image. So in this particular quick example, we're just going to be using the manual tools over here for our marquee. Now I'm going to be working with the polygonal lasso tool really quick here. I'm not going to select out this entire building. This is just sort of a quick tips little video on how to cut out various things in Photoshop. So let's work with this. There's lots of corners and edges and angles in this, so this polygonal lasso tool might work well for us. Now with this particular tool, all you do is you just simply single click to start. So you click right here, and then as you pull the mouse, you can see you get this little line. So all you have to do is just click again, and you just keep single clicking as you're moving along here to make your selection. Now as soon as I come to this point, you can see this is obviously a circle. I can't get around this with this tool, but we can ignore that. We'll fix that here in a minute. Let's just move along over here to this edge. We'll single click here, and I'm going to go a little bit quicker here. I'm not going to be very careful. Whoops, I accidentally double clicked. That's okay. You can just hold down Shift. Double clicking, by the way, will end your selection or complete the selection. but I'm just going to be adding to it by hitting Shift here. So I'm just going to go up and around this top portion of the building. I'm going to ignore this little piece for now. And again, here we have the same problem. We have a circle, so I'm going to ignore it. So I'm just going to jump over here to this side, and we'll start back down on this column. Come down to the roof, over here. A couple more clicks here, and we'll be done. Now, if you ever accidentally mess up, so let's say you come in here and you clicked here and you went like this, and you said, oh, I don't want to undo everything. Just go ahead and press the backspace or delete key, and it'll just back you up one point at a time, so then you can continue to fix where you left off. So there's a little tip if you accidentally click in the wrong spot. So back up again here to the top. We'll just cut across here, back down this other side a little bit, and that'll be good enough for this little sample here. And I'm just holding down space bar to get the pan key because I'm fairly zoomed in, as you can tell, so you can kind of see this. And that's close enough. We'll come down here, I'll zoom back out, and I'll come over here and finish off the selection. So I'll click up in here and click up in here. And then again, you can hover back to your original spot, and you can see that your cursor switches to the little circle, meaning that now when I click, it will complete the selection, or you can just double click close, and it will complete that entire selection. Okay, so there's my little selection here. I didn't even realize, but I made a little mistake right here. So we can fix those easily with this tool. So I'll just go ahead and add that back in. So again, holding down Shift, I can click here, cruise back down here, and then just add in that little piece that I missed. Okay, now let's fix these tops. So you can see here that this is a circle selection. So I'm just going to switch my tool up here to the elliptical marquee tool. And with this tool, what you can do is you can just click and drag, right, any sort of shape, any circle shape that you want. But as soon as I let go, it deletes my other selection. So I don't want to do that. I want to do Command Z here. You want to hold down the Shift key while you make that selection in order to be able to add to the selection. I'm going to undo again one more time because there's kind of two keys we need to hold down. We're going to hold down the Shift key to add mode, start to click and drag our little circle, and then also hold down the space bar at the same time, which allows us to move this selection around. And then I can kind of just move down over here, and I'm just trying to draw a big circle that's about the same size as the top half of this. So I'm just letting go of space bar. My Shift is still held down. I'll let go of space bar, move, let go of space bar, move, and you just kind of get it exactly where you want it, and then let go. So now I've just added in that little piece. That works really well. And I'll zoom in here a click or two just so you can see this one more time. So again, hold down Shift and Shift, click your selection to get it going, then space bar to move it down into place. Let go of space bar if you need to kind of readjust the shape there, space bar to reposition it, and let go. So pretty easy to just kind of add these circles into this selection. I'll add this little ball here, and I guess maybe I'll just quickly try to get that little piece as well. Something like that. Good enough. Okay, so now we've got this little piece, and we're just going to do the exact same method to get this big circle right here. I'll zoom out a little bit because it's quite a bit bigger. And we'll get our circular marquee tool. Do this one more time here. So I'm going to get this top edge first. I'm going to just kind of get that little bell. Not a bell, but the top edge there. And then we'll do one more that's maybe going to get this little wider circle here. I probably should have started from the bottom, not from the top, but okay, close enough. You can see there's a few little problems there where I didn't pay attention to that I can clean up in a second here, but we'll just get this last little piece and let go and call that good enough for now. Okay, so there's the selection. Let's go ahead and just turn on the mask layer here so you can see how well that cut that thing out. And we'll zoom in here and you can see it looks great, right? We have these nice hard edges along this building. These little pieces that got added there and there were from the circle I didn't really pay attention to when I was doing that big one there. But let's throw in a solid background layer behind here with a solid color. It'll make it a little bit easier to see. And you can kind of see, right, that if we want to cut out things that are sort of industrial, I would say, with angles and edges, a great tool to use is the polygonal lasso tool. Okay, next example here. So let's move into this one. This comes from photographer Gift out of Ethiopia. And with this particular photograph, we're going to try to extract our entire subject from the background and place him in another location. Now, the tricky thing here that has traditionally been tricky is selecting this detail like the hair. right? This hair along the edges presents lots of challenges. And the old method of doing this hair-based selection in Photoshop, I say old because it was used before the tool I'm going to illustrate, was to do channel-based masking. So you would come into your channels, you would find the channel that has the deepest color contrast. For this one, the green one would probably be the best because it's giving me the most contrast between the hair and the background. Actually, that one actually might work pretty well too. The red channel gives me a good contrast there. That's probably the best one, actually, the red. So you'd come into the red, you would apply like a levels command on this red channel only. You can duplicate these channels. So I can just duplicate this channel down here and turn it on. You can come back over to your layers panel now. And whoops, I had the wrong layer active. We want to go back to this layer. Let's go back over here and turn that on. So you can have this, you could apply like a levels command, and we're just trying to basically create a mask visually here. Whoops. So I could punch in this and punch in this, pull this in, right? And we're trying to get solid black in the middle and solid white on the outside. So you would kind of do something like this, and then you would come in and maybe duplicate a channel and blend two channels together and kind of do some work like that to get sort of some semi-transparency in your mask here in the background. So again, that's kind of the old way of doing things. We don't have to do any of that work anymore because the new tool in Photoshop, the Refine Edge tool, kind of does it all for us. So let's go ahead and look at a couple of tips on extracting hair or fuzzy things from the background. So first off, the method I like to do, there's a lot of different ways you could do this, but I like to get what I call a garbage selection, just a temporary selection inside of the subject. We're going to use the Quick Select tool to do that. So the Quick Select tool, again, if you haven't worked with it, works sort of like a brush where you paint a selection. So you start on the inside of your subject and paint towards the edges. So I'll zoom in a little bit here with this brush. So you just kind of click and drag, and you'll see that it kind of snaps and automatically jumps towards the edges when you start to move to the outside edges. And then I'll just paint up here in the middle a little bit, go around the hair, and then I'll just come down and get the bottom half here. Now you can see it did a little bit too much on the bottom edge. So if it does too much, you just hold down Option or Alt to go into subtraction mode and just kind of paint that back out, and it'll subtract out those little pieces that it wasn't supposed to get. Okay, now that's pretty good right there. Now, again, the way I like to work when I'm selecting hair from the background is zoom in nice and close, and I don't want my selection to be outside of any of the area that is part of the background. In other words, the red grading here on this metal gate or door is bleeding through the hair right here. So I want to back my selection up so that my selection is only over the areas that are completely opaque. Okay. So in other words, what I can do here is switch back to this tool. I'm going to decrease the size a little bit, hold down Option or Alt to go into minus mode and just kind of back off these edges. They just went a little too far. So I'll just back these off a little bit around the edge. And again, this is just the way I like to do it. There's a few other methods here, but I think this method works pretty well. So we'll back that up a little bit. Same thing over here. Anywhere I can see red bleeding through, I'll back that off. Now that's probably a little bit too much over there, so I can add a little bit back in, maybe add a little bit here. But we don't need to be too picky here. Maybe just another click there because we can finish some of this in the next command. So now that I've got that sort of backed in a little bit, the command we're going to use is right here. It's called Select and Mask. So once you have your active marquee or your marching ants, just go ahead and press the Select and Mask button. Now the default color of the mask is blue. Now there's several modes here. You can see I can look at this in onion skin mode, marching ants overlay, on white, black and white, or transparent called on layers. So this is just preview modes. They don't affect anything. It's just different ways of previewing your selection. Now when I'm working with hair, I really like to work in overlay mode, and I like to set my color to be opposite of whatever the background is. So I think the default color in Photoshop is probably red, but since the background is red of the image, I don't want that. So I've switched this over to blue to kind of have a cool color instead of a warm color. And then when I'm doing this next little bit, we'll be able to see the background be extracted. Okay, so you can take your opacity up or down, doesn't really matter. I like to have it a little bit less than what I have right now. So maybe 30-40% for this example, so I can still see the mask. And all you're gonna do at this point is just zoom in a little bit and make sure that you've gotten pretty close to the edges. Now, if you're way cut in, you can always grab your mask tool. It's this tool right here. They call it the brush tool. So you click on the brush, and this allows you to paint in with the plus mode active, or switch to minus and paint it back out. So you can easily just switch between plus and minus, use your modifier keys if you want to as well, and kind of paint out this edge if you went a little bit too far in different spots to get closer, right, to those edges. Or maybe here I want to subtract a little bit in to get those areas just right. Okay, so don't worry about messing up because you can always adjust your mask right here at any time. Now the tool we're going to be primarily using is this Refine Edge tool. So go ahead and select the Refine Edge tool. It kind of has this funny looking icon right there. And the way this tool works is you want to try to select a brush size, just using your bracket modifier keys, right bracket and left bracket, to increase or decrease the size. That's just a little bit bigger than the area you're trying to extract. So this size works pretty well here for this top little piece. I don't want to have a big brush like this, and I don't want to have a teeny tiny brush smaller than that area. So just a little bit bigger than the area you're trying to work with. And all you do is you just kind of start in the middle, and you just sort of start to paint out towards the edges, and you just kind of paint along. Now I'm just going to paint down here along these edges, and then periodically just let go of the mouse button and it will apply that command. You don't want to try to do too much at once. So then you just kind of come down through here and paint. I'm just moving the mouse here back and forth, and then let go. And then move back down here and paint and let go. I'm going to increase this just so I can speed this process up a little bit, so you don't have to sit here and watch me do this. Paint all the way down into here and let go. Pan back up in here, and I'll kind of go back over this top area. Paint and let go. And you just kind of keep working along the edges. Let go. Try it again. And again, if this command does too much or too little, you can always switch back to your mask, repaint it in, and then try it again. Okay, and that's pretty much all there is to it. So I've extracted this out. Now I want to show you the difference now when I switch back to this black on white. Look at how fancy that mask is. So if we get our zoom tool and zoom in here tight, I mean, Photoshop did a pretty amazing job at selecting all the semi-transparent areas of that hair, and it's going to give us a pretty slick mask. So that's kind of the steps for working with selecting hair. Now in this select and mask command, there's also several other sliders over here on the right that help you work with the main area of the mask. In other words, the edges of the subject right here. Notice what happens when I take the smoothing and I take it up. See how that edge right there just smoothed itself way out? Let me go backwards so you can see that again. That's before and that's after. The feathering will feather the edge. You can see if I take that feathering up, it really feathers the edge. The contrast kind of does the opposite of feather. It tries to tighten up the edge. So you can see when I increase the contrast, it'll try to tighten up that edge. And then Shift Edge will either cut into your subject or expand out from your subject or the marching ant area. So you can kind of play around with those values if you want. I'm going to put these all back to 0 and leave Shift Edge on 0. So I'm going to take smoothing and just maybe take it up just a little bit to kind of smooth out a few of those edges. And then I like to take contrast up just a little bit as well to kind of tighten up the edge. That's about all I'm going to do there. Again, you can play with those values to get a little bit cleaner edge along there. Now you have several options when you're ready to get out of this command. And the one I like to do is just switch over here and just choose Layer Mask. So I'm going to go ahead and choose a Layer Mask, which means it's going to automatically create a mask. Photoshop will create a mask from this selection, and go ahead and hit OK. And there you go. So you can see the result here of this selection that Photoshop did. Pretty amazing job. And just to see how well it works, let's do the same thing we did before. Let's drop this in, fill this with a solid background color, and you can see how you can still see that color bleeding through. Now red was the original color of the background, so let's switch this to something else, just so we can see how much color tinting and fringing we have. So even with blue, there's a little bit of red in there you can still see. And there are some ways we can get rid of that red with defringing and a little option called Decontaminate Colors as well. You can go up into here and actually can't remember where this command is. Let's do a quick search for it. Decontaminate, there it is, it's under matting. So it's under layer matting. So you go down to layer matting, you can choose this color decontamination and run that, and it will try to remove some of those fringes. But that tool, the Refine Edge and Select and Mask tool, is a great way of extracting the subject from the background and maintaining that semi-opacity, or that semi-transparency, I guess is a better word, into the background. Okay, third one here. This comes from photographer Yvonne. I'm not even going to try to pronounce the last name. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. So this one is a little bit tricky as well. So, you may say, well, this is geometric. Maybe I could go for the geometric tool, but it's going to take you just forever trying to, get away a selection all the way around these buildings. But we do have a common color, and that's the blues. And the blue is really only on the ocean and sky. And so we can actually select the blues and sort of do an inverse. Something I always recommend is always look for the inverse of what you're trying to select. Oftentimes that will be a lot quicker than actually selecting the thing you want to cut out. So in this case, let's go ahead and look at our color commands. So again, there's primarily two of them. One of them is the Magic Wand tool. Now the Magic Wand tool allows you to select things by color. So you simply just single click. Photoshop will sample the color underneath where you selected and select all similar colors. And the amount or range of colors it selects is based on the tolerance value. If you increase the tolerance, I'm going to double it to 32 and deselect with Command D and click again. You can see it selects more of that color. If you decrease it down to 8 and you click, it's going to select a much smaller range. So what you can do is you can kind of just play with these numbers a little bit. My recommendation is always double or half. Don't go to 36 and 37. Just double or half until you get close, and then do your fine adjustments. So you can see this is, that's getting me close, but it's still not anywhere. You can always click once, hold down Shift to add, and click again to add another set of colors to the existing. So you can keep doing this to just keep adding all these blues in. Just click, 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 click. That's one method. But we're still not close. So I'm going to go up to 64 and let's try that again. So 64 gets most of the sky, but we're not quite getting all the blues we want. So let's go one more. Let's go to 128 and kind of see what that does. And now you can see that 128 is one step too much, because now I'm selecting into these blues right here. And so it's getting actually part of the buildings, which I don't want. So 128 is too much. 64 is too little. So then you start to do your fine adjustments and do things in the middle. So let's maybe, go to 100. And click and see, and that's pretty close. 100 is. So I'm just going to run with this number. So 100, I will hold down Shift now and add in these darker colors here. Well, that's getting me too much there, so I probably need to just start here. We'll add in the sky. And then now we're going to half this number back down to 64 and add in some of these. That's still too many there, so let's go back down to 32. I'm just trying to get some of these blues out of the ocean here. And we'll just click into a couple of these. Well, that's okay there. And that's pretty close. So we've selected most all of the blues in here. You can see we selected a little bit too much in here, but you're never going to get this command to be just right. That's okay the way it is. And now let's go ahead and zoom in, and we're just going to do a manual like we did before, a manual selection here. So let's just cut this part out. I'm going to use my Magic Wand just to go really quick here. Or not Magic Wand, the lasso tool. And I'll just subtract this out because we got a little too much. We didn't want all this. So I'm just holding down Alt or Option there to subtract out some of those areas that we didn't want. And maybe a little bit, we could add in some of these areas. Oops, I did the wrong thing there. I wanted to hold down Option because it got a little bit too much in there. Okay, close enough for now. We've got the gist here of all that. So we can zoom in here and see how well we did. You can see it selected pretty well. All along those edges here of the building are fairly well selected with the blues. And let's just turn this into a quick mask right now and see how that looks. And we're going to invert that mask because we wanted everything but that. So let's select the mask and go ahead and click on the invert button right somewhere. Where is the invert button? Oh, there it is. I wasn't scrolled down. Whoops. Invert right there, and there we have. Now we've cut out all those guys. Okay, so that's one method. Now I'm going to delete this mask and show you the other command. So the other option is using the color range command. And it's pretty nice because you get a bit of a visual while you're doing the command. So that's underneath the select down to color range. And you can see with this command, it works pretty similar to the magic wand. In fact, I think the algorithm is actually the same. But you can kind of see what's going to be selected via this little teeny preview right here. So what you do is you just come out here and you just click to sample a color. And you can see whatever area turns white are the pixels that are being selected. So if I come over here and click on this, it's selecting most of the ocean. And you just click, and you can hold down Shift again and click again to get a little bit more and a little bit more. Now that went one too many, so I would undo that one. And then you can drag this fuzziness slider to increase or decrease the density of the selection around those colors. So you can kind of see from this preview what's going to be selected. You can switch back and forth between the image and the selection. And you can also look at your selection preview and go with a grayscale, black matte, white matte as well. And then you kind of get this full size preview exactly of what the matte is going to look like for the mask. So it's a pretty nice little command here to be able to visualize and see exactly what's going to happen. So again, you just hold down Shift to reselect more and more of those colors. And that's pretty good right there. Maybe I would couple more pieces of the ocean here. Just holding down Shift and clicking through a few of these areas. Get a little bit. Now that maybe is a hair bit much, so I can back off the opacity there a little bit, or the fuzziness. And you kind of just get a little selection you're happy with and hit OK. And it will turn all of that into a selection. And you can, of course, from this point do your manual work. So I can switch over to the rectangular tool, hold down Shift, and just add in all of that, and add in all of this, add in all of this. You know, what I'm really paying attention to is how well it did along these edges right here. That's kind of the key part. And you can see it did a pretty good job. You know, all this other stuff in the middle, we can easily just, you know, select manually with our marquee tools or even the quick mask mode to just add that back in the middle. Whoops, I did the wrong key again. Subtract that back out. So the color range command will let you select things based on color. And then we can just go ahead and cut that right out, and you can see it does a nice little, again, I'm not really paying attention to the inside in this particular case. Invert that again, and it does a pretty good job of just automatically going along those edges and just cutting all that stuff out based on color. So that is the third sample. All right, the last one here is this photograph from photographer Ollie Woodman. There's his contact out of the UK. And you can see that this is definitely a British car because I have never seen it here in the States. But they like their compact mini cars with the small roads over there. So this is a little bit of a challenge for all the different tools we've looked at so far. Color-based selection is going to give me, you know, the blues. Whoops, if I can get on the right layer. It's going to give me the blues out of the car, but it's not going to give me the wheels and everything else. That doesn't work well. The lasso tools, polygonal lasso tools aren't going to work well. So in other words, none of the tools work super well here. The quick select tool is probably going to give us the best results to get inside of this, and it'll actually work pretty well. But the best for this job is the pen tool, a manual selection with the pen tool. Anytime you have curvy organic shapes like this, the pen tool is your best friend. Now, a lot of people really struggle with the pen tool in Photoshop or Illustrator. It takes a little bit of practice to get the hang of it. And there's some great tutorials on working with the pen tool. But this is going to be our best friend for creating this selection. Okay, so whenever you're working with the pen tool, get in nice and tight. You'll see a lot of times with people that are working with the pen tool, they'll sit here and they'll make these little teeny tiny clicks all over the place. And that's kind of indicative of somebody who doesn't know how to use the pen tool. Okay, you want the least amount of points, I just deleted my image, the least amount of anchor points as possible when working with the pen tool. So the way the pen tool works, of course, it's going to give you organic shapes. So if you click and just click, it works basically exactly like the polygonal lasso tool. It's all hard edged. But if you click and drag the mouse, you pull out what are known as the Bezier handles. So you can click and drag, and then you can create these nice organic curvy shapes. And that's really what we're after today. So let's just start here. I'll start at the bottom of the car. I'm actually going to do this one to completion. So I'll do a little click here, and I'm going to go pretty quick here. We're not going to try to be too fancy. But what we do is you just kind of come up and click and pull until you get that angle. You can see that. I'll try to zoom in here. That angle, you want to just pull these handles until you get that to follow along the curvature of whatever you're trying to select. So that's kind of the object here with this tool. Now, if you come to a point like this, whoops, I just hit the wrong key. And the next click with the pen tool, you can see it bends the opposite way. So what you can do is you hold down the Alt key and click that point, and it will get rid of the top Bezier handle, allowing you to then create a new curve off of the bottom one, like so. You just Option click that or Alt click that if you ever need to go kind of back, create like an S shape and bend back the other way. So let's kind of just move through here fairly quickly. So I can just pull that little point there. I'll Alt click and come up here, pull a little point here. Whoops. Kind of pull maybe one right there. All right, now let's see how much of this we can get. I'm a little bit bent in too far there, so I'll come maybe somewhere up there and we'll try to get this curve in just maybe a couple clicks here. That's working pretty well. I'm not going to pay attention to the windshield wiper or anything right now. So we'll come all the way up here to the top. Let's see if we can get this entire windshield in one curve. So that's pretty good right there. Actually, that's not pretty good. I can't really tell. We'll do this in two. And we'll come across the back here. This kind of has a funny little, it kind of bends up right there. It's kind of a little bit weird there. Keep coming along the back. A little bit of a swoop here. Bend and pull that one in, just a single click there. A little bit of a swoop there. And we'll do this all in one piece here. And whoops, 2 clicks there. It kind of pulls out and pulls in a little bit. Whoops. And I wish I had some jokes to tell, but I can't talk and click at the same time. So almost done here. So you kind of get the idea. You just click and pull, and you don't have to worry too much about this tool because it's a vector shape. You can always go back and fix any of these anchor points after the fact, because we can modify the shape of a vector at any point in time. So it's kind of like a bit of a non-destructive way of working. We'll get half the tire here. We'll click and pull kind of maybe half of that. Come up in here and click and pull that other half. Just do some single clicks around there since we can't really see that anyway. It's in the shadow. Pull all the way into here, down into here. Again, I'm just doing the outside of the tire, I guess, on this particular little car here, but let's actually come in tighter here since I can't really see that. It's in the shadow. And then back into there. Okay, so there's our car. All selected out, and it's in a path. So when you have a selection, you come over here to your paths, and that's where your working path is. Now again, because this is vector, if I need to come in and refine a point, like over here I just kind of did some hard edges, but if I needed to turn one of these into an angle, you can get your white arrow tool and grab a single point and just move one point around and nudge this up and pull this over to get it just exactly perfect. Or I can get this pen tool and come down into my convert point tool, and I can pull out 2 handles from this and then, work with these handles and bend those around just how I want them and move this. So again, very versatile when you have a path-based selection. So I'll just undo that and leave this back angled. So now that I have this guy as a path, I can turn this path into a pixel-based selection. So all you need to do here is just right-click. If you have any of the vector tools selected, you can right-click. And there's an option in here that's called Make Selection. So I'll click on the Make Selection option and hit OK. And then I can go ahead and just turn that into a mask, and that's just beautifully cut out, right? I can place this over any sort of background I want. It has all these great, perfect, nice, smooth edges that you just would not be able to get any other way unless you use the pen tool. So anytime you have sort of organic shapes, the pen tool is going to be your best friend for working with selections. So the last little tip here I want to throw out before we end up this little video on selecting things out of the background of Photoshop is how to save a selection. So let's say I did all this work and I have my marching ants here. I'll delete this mask. And I don't want to lose all this nice work I've done or any of these other images really. You can save a selection inside of a Photoshop file that it'll sort of permanently reside there. So you come up to the select menu, you go down to the save selection option, and I'll just call this blue car and hit OK here. And now that selection will be saved inside of Photoshop. So you notice I just deselected, I hit Command D, or I don't know what I did, I deselected there. So that would normally be a destructive command, but because I saved it, I can just go to my select menu, load selection, choose my blue car right here and hit OK, and it pops right up back just how it used to be. And those are saved actually as a channel. So all your custom selections are just really saved as channels inside of Photoshop, which is kind of handy to be able to grab them in there as well. So that is just a few tips on selecting things, a few different methods with varying tools. I hope you learned something. If you have your own tip and your own methods, definitely post them in the comments and we'll learn from each other. All right, thanks.